Hey there, welcome to First Look. I'm doing this a little later in the week than I normally would, but I am in the park and it is a lovely day for a walk, so let's get to it. Um, Yesterday I went to, there's a national conference that happens to be in Pittsburgh this year, and it has a fancier title than it you probably need to have, but it's called the Festival of Homiletics. And hold on before I get run over by this bicyclist. So the Festival of Homiletics. Homiletics is just a fancy word for preaching. So it's a whole conference on preaching. And just given my week and whatever, I just had a chance to get like a day pass for yesterday. And so it's always fascinating to see people do what you do and, continue to learn from much more experienced folks and people who, there's workshops on how to deal with certain issues or certain parts of the year. There's vendors that you can visit. There's worship services that you can attend and hear preachers from around the country. So it's just really good. And so that's what I got to do yesterday. So I'm a little behind on stuff that I like to do like this. And this week is a very cool week for a couple of different reasons. First, it's Pentecost. So we'll talk about the Pentecost passage here in a second. But we're doing something unique. I don't know that we've maybe ever done this exact combination of things. And trying something new at the same time. So we happen to have a confirmation group that is graduating, and I'm going to be joining the church here on Sunday, which is always exciting. I think this is my second confirmation class since I've been here, and this is a really wonderful group, and I'm excited about who they are and what they continue to bring. And some of them have been, at the church for a very long time, and some of them are relatively new. So that's all very exciting. So we have that coupled with something that we're calling the celebration of service. And that's kind of a chance for us to, do kind of what it sounds like, to recognize people within the church, either who are currently serving or who have served in very particular capacities. So we have times of recognition for current elders and deacons and folks who are doing that, but we have a lot of specialized ministries in the church, and we don't have special days for them, big, times of ordination or installation or recognition in that kind of a way. So we wanted to do something like that. And the genesis of that was that we're having some of these ministries are pivoting in terms of leadership. And so we thought, well, maybe this is a good time to do it. Some of those ministries that we're talking about are organized, they're not committees per se. Some of them are committees, but they're groups within the church that do service in one way, shape, or form. And but then other ones who people submitted, we had folks submit names of people, either present or past, that they wanted to recognize. Some of them are folks who are representing Northmont in maybe more unofficial capacities, who are volunteering in the community, who are extending love and compassion to people in and out of the church. And so it was just a way for us to be able to extend our thanks to those folks, knowing, of course, that we would never be able to get maybe the complete exhaustive list. I mean, there are people in this congregation who have made it what it is over a very long period of time. And next year we have our 100th anniversary as a church, and one of the things that we'll be doing here is we have a couple of folks on session who are going to be sort of helping to coordinate a little team of people who are going to put some celebrations together throughout next year. And undoubtedly, a part of that is going to be what has, service and community look like in this church. And so I kind of like the idea that part of what we'll be doing here is sort of kicking off some of that celebration. And one of the questions I got about, well, what makes it so that we're doing, why are we doing these two things together? Why are we having this celebration of service on the same day as confirmation, as the same day of Pentecost? Well, especially because it's new, it's not like it's something that we've always done or whatever. Well, all of it, believe it or not, does have a purpose and a reason and planning and thought ahead of time into why we would do that. And some of that I'm going to try to explain, of course, on Sunday. But I thought, all of you are investing time in this first look thing. I might as well give you a sneak peek into what we're going to be talking about. So Pentecost and confirmation, I think, is one of those things that feels like a natural kind of pairing for people. It's the birth of the church, it's the celebration of the church. It's, it's the kind of looking at the newness of it. I have another cyclist who's coming my way. So you have that element of the way it all works. And then, having confirmation kind of be a part of that, is like, the newness and the future and where the church is headed, and, it's like that kind of feel. So I think that seems very natural to people, for good reason. So that part is easy to explain. The part that I think takes a little bit more thought is why put those things together, the celebration part and the confirmation part. Well, one of the reasons that we decided that was a good idea actually comes out of the fact that it is Pentecost, and what Pentecost is, what it has been, what it was whenever the disciples were the ones receiving the Spirit on that day, and then what it's supposed to mean to us moving forward. Because all of that is kind of a all-in-one package deal. Here's what I mean. So, just because Acts 2 is a really well-known passage, and it's pretty long, I thought I could stop and I could read it to you, but I decided that I would just talk about it and let you, you could pause and read it on your own or do whatever you'd like. So it's Acts 2, I think it's like verse 2 through 21, I think, is the reading for Sunday. And so that covers kind of the whole of the story. So you have the disciples gathered in a room, and they're there, and the ascension has already happened, and it's on Pentecost, and it even says in the passage that it was Pentecost. Now, if you're noticing that, if you're like, it already says the day that it is, I wonder why that is. Well, it's not because the authors of the gospel called it that. It's because they were there on a pre-existing celebration. So you might have heard me say, or someone else say, that Pentecost wasn't invented on that day. Its meaning expanded, but it wasn't created on that day. So the people are gathered there. Again, it's after the ascension. It's basically 50 days after. So 50 days after Passover, or in our case, after Easter. So Pentecost was already a day of celebration within that tradition. And so it was a celebration of harvest, right? Which of course makes sense in our minds, why that day would kind of be the day that God decided to do this new thing through the disciples. So Pentecost is sort of this celebration of the harvest and God's kind of fruitfulness and blessing. And so this day was already uniquely special. So it already pre-existed. So we take what has already been, we take what was, and then we add to it. We make it new, right? And so we have there the birth of the church. So what we know is, oh yeah, my little area of contemplation. So what we know is that, we have these, the great wind and the tongues, or fire like tongues, coming upon the disciples and resting on them, and they were filled with the Holy Spirit. And then they go out to where the people are, and they're speaking in all these different languages, and they're so everyone heard them, they in their own native language, and it goes through all these people that were gathered there in that moment. And it talks about how amazing it was for the people to hear the gospel in their own language, and the disciples proclaim who Christ is and what's happening. And then you have all these people who join, basically, who become a part of the fold, by the droves. And so it's the beginning of the church. So what this passage does is that it bridges not a gap, but it kind of marries two ideas for us in one moment. It gives us a glimpse of where we have been, right? The disciples, the people there would have known and what Pentecost was, and the celebration that that was very meaningful and long-standing and all those things. They would have taken what was, and then from there started something new, right? The future began in that moment. And so that's what you see happening on Pentecost, this expansion of what already was, this inclusion of people who were not in the fold. And so now you have this new start that has been created. And so to take that idea and pivot it to confirmation specifically, what we really tried to do with this confirmation class was just to kind of give you a breakdown of what confirmation has looked like for these folks. There's five kids who are doing this, and they had a number of projects. So there were some things that they all did independently, and there were some things that they did collectively. So we would gather once a month in a plenary, I guess you could say, and learn about the core basics of what it means to be Presbyterian, Reformed theology, the Bible, how is the church organized, all that kind of stuff. And we did that with Highland and Wexford, hoping that we could get a broader sense of, the church is, bigger than just the kids we have, but also they would get a chance to hear from other Presbyterian pastors, have a broader experience, that kind of thing. So, since the beginning of 2024, we've been gathering together in these groups. And then I have been meeting with them sometimes in small groups and sometimes individually to kind of go over certain projects that they had to work through. So things like sermon reviews, reading through passages of scripture, a lot of scripture. And then they had a statement of faith that they had to write. And they had a practical project they had to do. And they had to attend a session meeting, hoping that would all give them kind of a sense of, church isn't just about believing all the right things, because none of us believe all the right things, and we're all trying to figure this out as we go. And it's difficult and complicated and all the things that church is, but it's also community, and it's also worship, and it's also kind of choosing the way you're going to serve, and it involves an investment in the people around you, so they got a glimpse, an intentional glimpse into thinking about sermons critically and thinking about their faith critically. And they had a mentor, so people that came along to help guide and answer questions if they needed it, and just check in with them and that kind of thing. So they had intentional interactions with leadership. They had intentional interactions with worship. They had intentional interactions with the community in terms of serving it. So some of them decided to do mission type stuff. Some of them did facilities type stuff. So they all kind of participated in different ways, because that's what church is, right? It's not just what we do on Sunday. It's what we do in the building, out of the building, during the week, all those things that So that was a big part of their experience. And so with all of that as sort of the backdrop, the base for this confirmation process, not being just this theoretical exercise, but being something that was tangible, we put the celebration of service and confirmation all on Pentecost for a lot of the same reasons that I just mentioned. What Pentecost is, right? What Pentecost is helps to define why we do all that together. So if Pentecost didn't just spring out of nothing, right? It was a pre-existing celebration that then moved and evolved into what we know it today as a kind of the birth of the church after Jesus. It's the same thing here. They are joining this particular church at this particular time, at this particular reason, in this moment. And they have all of these people surrounding them, people that are committed to caring for them, loving them, encouraging them. Some of them were there in their baptism, and that's something that they're signing on to. They're signing on to not only just being a part of a church, but being a part of this one specifically. And so having a visual understanding of the fact that, like, we have these people who are not only elders and deacons, but who are who serve on committees, and who serve small groups, and who serve the community, and who are a part of PW and Nitwits and Stephen Ministers and all these things that we do, that that's all connected, right? just like Pentecost was connected to where it was, to what it becomes, the church is all connected in that way. So we're going to have these representations then of showing them how they're connected to all these people. Now, they're not going to know all these people at first, but they're going to get to know them. And they're not like junior members of the church, they're members of the church. And they should be as invested in who we are currently, understanding who we've been, and then investing in where we're going as much as anybody else. And so understanding who the church is right now, Northmont specifically, is an important and intentional piece of that. And so we want to be able to make those very intentional connections for them in the moment. The Pentecost story that you hopefully have just read or reminded yourself of, what made it so powerful for the people who were gathered there was that they heard the gospel in their own language, and they were, how included they felt, how a part of what was happening they felt. They knew what was happening. That wasn't new, but it was the fact that the gospel was presented to them in a way that literally spoke to who they were, and that made sure that they weren't outsiders, but that were a part of something that was already moving and already working, and had already done these amazing things, had this long-standing traditions and past, and that people would have felt very disconnected from. And Pentecost, the just gloriousness of it was the including, reaching out that it did, that made people feel welcome and at home and like they were a part of something. And that emphasis, I think, is really where I want to focus here as we're talking about this for this week. So I hope that we're able to kind of drive home that idea as much as possible, not only for those who are going to be participating, in terms of the adults and the staff and the whatever, but also for the youth who are saying yes. Because if their only connection to the church is limited to, a youth person or the spiritual formation committee or me or some little segment of the church that they interact with most of the time, then I think you lose a huge part of what it means to be a part of a church. You're never going to know everybody. It's never going to be, no one has the same, we don't all have the same experience of this church or any other church. Some people are, very connected to the worship and choir. Some people are very connected to mission. Some people are very connected to those social groups. Some people are on, session or deacons or, whatever it happens to be. Your angle into Northmont is going to be unique to you, and that's great. But having as many connections within that, I think, is important, because it shouldn't be limited to just one perspective. Just like learning about the Bible shouldn't be limited to just your perspective. We had this whole thing last week on Mother's Day with the cantata, and it was a very unique piece, and I talked about that, and I talked about the need for perspective and for an expanse in our perspective, and that's a big piece of what it means to join the church. The youth or anyone who's coming into Northmont, you know, is going to see it from, you know, one particular angle, and they're saying yes to it for one particular reason, but eventually they get to know the fuller story, and that's what we're trying to encourage. So I hope that makes sense. I hope that gives you something to kind of think about and ponder and look forward to as we move into the season of Pentecost. I hope you get a chance to, if you didn't today, to read over some of what we'll be doing, or reading over the service, looking at some of the things that we'll be doing this week. I think that these 5 kids are going to change Northmont for the better, and I think they already have. And I'm excited about the ways that we're going to grow together in that way. So thanks for doing this with us. Thanks for those who participated in submitting things for the celebration of service. And we've got, you know, we're pretty much closed on that because we got to print the bulletins and all that fun stuff. So, you know, we'll make sure we do that as well as we can. So until this Sunday, I hope you have a wonderful week. Thanks for doing this with me, and I will see you next time for another First Look. So take care.